Welcome to Volunteer Journal. I'm your host, Walter Black. On Volunteer Journal, we introduce you to some of the persons who are improving the quality of life in our community through their involvement in volunteer-based programs. In a few minutes, we'll chat with the Executive Director and Curator of one of Houston's outstanding cultural institutions, located just a mile west of downtown. It's called the Museum of Printing History. But first, we'll learn about some key operations and initiatives of the Harris County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and the important roles volunteers can and do play in disaster preparedness and response. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. As indicated, our first guest is with the Harris County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. He is Francisco Sanchez, Public Information Officer for the department. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you for having me, Walter. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. Francisco, if I were to try to do an organizational chart of I'll call it the Office of Emergency Management, just to simplify things, of your department, I think I would probably get confused. I think there are probably many interrelationships there, going up to the federal government, coming down to the county and the city, and then some peripheral relationships, just as important, with maybe non-governmental entities. Could you kind of give us a feel for that structure and set of interrelationships?
Glad to. Texas statute says that the county judge, who's the chief elected officer for the county, is in charge for Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the county. And under that is the Harris County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, which handles the day-to-day operations and the planning for emergencies in our community. And under that, we've got a set of planners that work on an all-hazards approach for seeing how we would plan to respond to any type of disaster in our community. We've got an operations section. We've got a logistics section, a communications and public information section where we go out and educate the community about how they can be prepared for disaster. But we also, more important than that, Harris County is 1,777 square miles, and Harris County alone has 4.1 million residents. So staff of 20-something like us can't safeguard the county against everything, but we can prepare for and help our partners prepare to and respond to any type of disaster. Certainly we have a working relationship with the state and our federal partners, and that's very important. So we plan for those disasters and how we respond on a daily basis, so those relationships are practiced and well maintained before a disaster. But we also have to engage the community to make sure that they're prepared. Nonprofit organizations, the volunteer organizations in our community are a tremendous resource when we have to respond to a disaster. And it's also important that we maintain those relationships beforehand. By its very nature, disasters tend to overwhelm the community, which means resources are gone out of the community. People can do less than what they could before a disaster strikes because those resources are stretched. But one of the things that I've seen that's very resilient about this community, while those other resources diminish, one resource that grows up in volumes is the volunteers in this community that help us respond to disaster. And so that's one of the things where we engage not only our citizens, our federal and state partners, but our nonprofit organizations, and of course the business community, to make sure that we plan and prepare for and are able to respond to any type of disaster in our community.
Mm-hmm. And you refer to any type of disaster, and I've been struck with the fact that even with regard to a certain type of disaster, like a weather-related disaster, the differences from occasion to occasion can be so striking. For instance, just going back in fairly recent memory, we had Tropical Storm Allison, and that behaved in a certain way and it caused a certain type of problem. Then we had Katrina, which didn't happen here, but we were implicated, and fortunately we stepped up to the plate, the Houston community, and played a major role in that. And then within a month of that, we were targeted by Hurricane Rita. which fortunately for Houston, at the last minute, did a little bit of a bypass. But that was after creating what was maybe the biggest traffic jam in the world.
Right.
People trying to get out of the city of Houston. And then, of course, Hurricane Ike. And with Hurricane Ike, we had tremendous power failure, which meant a breakdown in communications. People couldn't use the internet. People's cell phones ran out of juice. So it seems to me that no matter how much thinking you do about some of these things, the next one that comes along is probably going to throw you a little bit of a curve. Can you tell me how you try to anticipate?
Sure. A plan for a response is sort of a living, breathing document. We're always revising it. We're doing that throughout the year, and we learn from each disaster. Tropical Storm Allison was something that hovered over our community and created a lot of problems and flooding. And up until Hurricane Katrina was probably one of the costliest urban area floodings in the nation's history. Then you had what people saw in Hurricane Katrina. We responded to that by opening up the Astrodome. That ended up being the largest shelter operation in the country's history out of the Astrodome. But there wasn't a plan for that, obviously, and we had never planned to house 60 to 70,000 people coming in and out of the Astrodome. But we had a plan in place for how we would respond to that. We did learn from that, and one of the challenges and one of the lessons learned from that is, based on Hurricane Rita coming, that we never wanted to open another shelter in the city of Houston for a fellow community that needs to evacuate from a hurricane, because we, like them, are susceptible to do that. So the shelter operation worked. We have the plans to make it happen if we need to again. But the biggest lesson learned is we don't ever want to open another shelter like this for a hurricane, because we might be next. Rita, we had the largest evacuation that the country has ever seen from a potential hurricane landing zone. We learned a lot of lessons from there in terms of how to educate the public about whether or not they should evacuate or stay here. So that went into our planning process. Then you had Hurricane Ike, where our community and we did a better job of evacuating those that were in harm's way out first, letting those folks in Galveston, those who touch water, let those community get out of harm's way before anybody else. And to tell people that if you live in certain parts of this community, you shouldn't evacuate. So all of those lessons build on each other. And that said, we also need to be very cognizant of also not planning for the last storm. We have to take those lessons, incorporate them into our plans, but it would be very dangerous for us to solely focus on the storms we've done in the past. I joke that it's our job to be paranoid. So we have to plan for any potential disaster in the future, and the guiding principle is to practice and to plan for the worst case scenario. Because if you plan for what you think is impossible, you're more likely to be ready for what's unexpected. So it's an ongoing process. When we face another disaster, whenever that might be, we'll take those lessons learned and apply them to plans that are relevant to that type of disaster if it's a weather event. But if there are nuggets of information and lessons learned that we can apply to planning for any other type of disaster, we'll do that as well.
And how disaster prone is the Houston area? You said something on the phone early today when we chatted briefly that
Right.
Kind of surprised me.
We have 35 presidentially declared disasters in Harris County. And there's only 2 other counties in the country that have more presidentially declared disasters than we do, and that's in California. And I would say they probably outrank us because of the wildfires they have there almost on an annual basis. It's not a good situation that we want to be in, to have 35 presidentially declared disasters, but there is an opportunity in there, and that is there are many disasters we respond to that aren't presidentially declared. Whether it's tornadoes, flooding, hazardous materials incidents, any of those type of things, ice storms, we've had those in the community. Those give us an opportunity on a regular basis to practice with our partners, to work with our state, federal, and local partners, our local business community, our volunteer organizations and nonprofit organizations. So if there is a benefit for us being in such a threat-prone environment, is we have to respond to things almost daily, and we have to work together. And we have to overcome those disasters. We have to practice our plans. We have to fine-tune them, and that goes often more between big disasters than it does during after major disasters. So we're continually planning, and those real-life events keep us sharp, keep us informed, and keep us engaged with our partners to make sure that how we respond to a community is something that can overcome a disaster.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, I know you'd like to devote a significant part of the rest of this interview to talking about something called Harris County Citizen Corps,
Right.
which is entirely appropriate for this program because that is the volunteer arm of disaster response in the Houston area. Does Harris County Citizen Corps have counterparts in many cities around the country?
It sure does. As a matter of fact, it was developed after September 11th in 2002, and that was a national program initiated to create a way for volunteers to be able to respond to and to prepare for disaster. Soon after that, the Harris County Citizen Corps program was developed, and other programs exist across the state and across the country, but ours is a national model. We have hundreds of teams and about 40 to 50,000 people volunteered that are trained for disaster response and readiness. When you think about it, only 1% of our population is a first responder. That means the other 99% during a time of crisis are relying on 1% of the population to come to their rescue if something goes wrong, and that's the challenge. One of the things that the Citizen Corps program does is train people to make sure that they're prepared for disaster beforehand and that they can help their neighbors. We've seen that in our community. We saw it after Allison, after Katrina, after Rita, and Hurricane Ike. People get out there, they volunteer, they help their neighbors, and they go to work and they roll up their sleeves to make a difference in their community. So if we can train all these people to use those skills for survival after a disaster, that's less of a strain on our first responders. And the reality is neighbors are the first responders after a disaster. It's the police and the fire service and the EMS that actually get there after someone makes a 911 call. So it's a really important program that has 5 critical components: the Medical Reserve Corps, volunteers and police service, the fire corps, and this Community Emergency Response Program and USA on Watch are 5 components of the program where any member of the community can sign up for something that they're interested in out of those 5 programs and go back and make themselves safer and their community more resilient as well.
Well, I don't think time will allow us to go into too much depth about the 5 elements, but let's at least touch on the Community Emergency Response Teams, or CERT. That's what we at Volunteer Houston work with the most. Can you give us a little deeper perception of what that involves?
Sure. A community emergency response team, it's an 8-week course over several weeks where you go a couple of nights a week and you learn some basic urban search and rescue, medical operations, fire suppression, and the very fundamental things that you need to do to be able to either help your neighbors during a disaster or to be prepared. We have those classes in the workplace. We have some companies that have created CERT teams, as we call them. We have some that have done in the faith-based community where a church or a house of worship has said, we want to create a team, so we offer it there. We do it in neighborhoods and civic clubs and want to say, I want a team for my neighborhood, and we help put that together. We do that training. We bring first responders to talk to members of the community, give them those skills. They get to practice those hands-on and be able to apply that. That only not makes their community safer, but also makes their neighborhood safer, their workplace safer, and it keeps them safer as well.
Is there any role for youth in any of this?
There is, as a matter of fact. We actually saw a spike in interest from young people, so we went and sort of branched out into something that's called a Teen CERT. Teen Citizen Corps. And we've got over 5,000 students, high school students, that have gone through the training. We take that to the schools. I think there are over 35 school districts in the Southeast Texas area that have taken on that program. So we bring these kids in with all that energy to figure out how they can go back and make their school safer, give them those basic skills that we give a regular CERT team, and they're really good about going back to their communities and being advocates of the program.
Well, that's very impressive. And I see we're running out of time, so in closing, let you give the phone number and website people
Sure.
can check out.
281-JOIN-NOW will get you a number at Volunteer Houston, and they'll get you information about how to become a Citizen Corps member, or you can join us online at harriscountycitizencorps.com and get more information about the program and sign up to be a member there.
Very good. Well, thanks so much,
Thank you,
Francisco. While we allow time for our second set of guests to take their places, we're going to tell you about some other volunteer opportunities available in the greater Houston area. Be a mentor to a young person in a program sponsored by a nonprofit youth services agency. Coming to a location in the Acres Homes area for an hour or two once a week, you'll interact with a small group of youngsters, to help them with their homework and engage them in light recreational activities. Sessions take place weekdays between 3:30 and 7:30 p.m. For more information, call Volunteer Houston at 713-965-0031. Dogs have their day every Saturday thanks to volunteers who staff an animal adoption station at a pet supply store in the Copperfield area for a local animal welfare organization. Duties can include grooming and showing off the dogs, taking them for walks, and keeping the cages clean. Volunteers should be at least 18 years of age. For information on this and other volunteer opportunities, please call Volunteer Houston at 713-965-0031. Help the needy by volunteering for Spring Branch Social Service Agency. Depending on your preferences, you can interview clients to identify their needs, answer incoming phone calls, or help out at the reception desk. A weekly 3-hour shift can be scheduled for your choice of weekdays. Training will be provided. For information on this and other volunteer opportunities, please call Volunteer Houston at 713-965-0031. Welcome back. Our guests on this segment of the show are with a museum that I've visited several times and have found to be a fascinating facility. It's called the Museum of Printing History, and our guests are Ann Caseman, the Executive Director, and Amanda Stevenson, the all-important curator. So welcome to you both, ladies.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And just to lay down some background, why don't you tell us a little bit about the mission and history of the museum?
Well, first of all, I'll read the mission statement.
Okay.
The mission of the museum is to promote, preserve, and share the knowledge of printed communication and art as the greatest contributors to the development of the civilized world and the continuing advancement of freedom and literacy.
Very good.
And the history of the museum was founded in about 1979 by 4 retired printers who had vast collections and wanted to share them with the community. And we are housed in what used to be the Hearn Lithography Building at 1324 West Clay, between Montrose and Wa.
Oh, okay.
And the museum has, in addition to classes and workshops and exhibitions, we also have a exciting educational program and and tours that we welcome people for. And we have a great need for volunteer assistance, so we really do appreciate being invited by you to
Very
speak about
good.
those volunteer needs.
Well, we'll try to cover most of those topics. How about admission? Is there a charge for admission?
Admission to the Museum of Printing History is free, and we are open from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. Tuesday through Saturdays. However, we do have guided tours with either our artist-in-residence, Charles Kreiner, or Amanda, our curator, and there is a charge for our tours. However, they are very reasonable. We charge $3 for students, $5 for seniors, and $7 for adults.
Very good. Well, let's talk about what's exhibited at the museum, and I guess Amanda may be most appropriate for that. Could you give us a sense of the exhibitions? I noticed in checking out your website there are 3 types of collections, I believe: permanent, visiting, and traveling exhibitions. Could you characterize each and kind of give us a sample feel for it?
Sure. At the museum, we're a 20,000 square foot facility, so half of our exhibition space is where we show our permanent collection, things owned and cared for by the museum. And our collection has grown over the last 30 years, and we have some really interesting and important things that illustrate this history of the printed word and image. One of the most important things we have early examples of printing is called the Giovanni Scroll, and it's one of the few remaining examples of printing, or one of the first examples of printing onto paper, and it's from the 9th century Japan. So it's a pretty significant piece, always on display. You can come anytime and take a look at that. And then our galleries kind of move into we call the Renaissance Gallery, where we have a replica Gutenberg press. It was built by a man named Steve Pratt in Utah, and it's what we think Johann Gutenberg's press looked like, and so you can take a look at that. It's an operable press, and on guided tours you get to pull a print from the press. We have in that gallery some very old pieces of printing history from the West, and they're examples of what we call incunabula, which are things printed between 1450 and 1500. Those things are always on display as well. And then we have, the galleries kind of move into colonial America, and we have another pretty large press in the Americana Gallery that people get to pull a print from. We print the Declaration of Independence in that gallery. There are a lot of documents, historical documents relating to American history. We have some things printed by Benjamin Franklin.
Originals?
Originals.
Wow.
We have a gallery dedicated to the history of Texas. We have some things printed by one of the first printers in Texas, Samuel Bangs. We have a 19th century print shop, basically a print shop called the Hearst Newspaper Gallery, and we talk about the advances made by the linotype machine, invented in 1868. The museum actively collects historic headlines, and so we have our hall of historic headlines, where you can read accounts of the sinking of the Titanic, various things like that. So that would be some of the things you would see in our permanent installations.
You mentioned linotype, and many viewers, I'm sure, are not real, they've seen the word, but don't really know what that is. Could you tell us?
Sure. Well, next to the printing press, the linotype machine is considered really the next great leap in printing technology. It was invented around 1868 by a German immigrant to America named Ottmar Mergenthaler. And what the linotype machine does, it's not a printing press, it's a typesetting machine. And so the operator sits at the machine at a keyboard, operates the keyboard much like a typewriter, and the machine sets up matrices, and then a line is cast. And then all of those cast lines, which are called slugs, are then put into the printing press. So it was so significant because it sped things up exponentially. Before the linotype machine, compositors set each letter, each space by hand. And then when they were done printing from the form, they would have to redistribute that type. The linotype, the slugs from the linotype machine just go back into a melting pot, so they don't have to be redistributed. It really ushered in the day of the daily newspaper.
Oh.
This enabled medium-sized shops to put out a daily newspaper.
I see.
It's quite significant.
Well, getting back to the exhibition concept, you've got visiting exhibitions, which I assume may be collections of things from other museums. Is that what that is?
In some cases from museums, in other cases borrowed directly from the artists or from other institutions. We really just have the permanent installations, and then we have the galleries where we present rotating exhibitions. So we've shown, just a wide variety of different types of material in the rotating exhibition spaces. We have 4 galleries where we present rotating exhibitions. We have a really ambitious schedule. We do over 12 per year of rotating exhibitions, or ones that we just borrow temporarily. Some, I create or organize kind of from the ground up. And others that are collections that are just sort of framed and ready to go up. But they all revolve around, the common thread is print. So we show fine art prints. We've had some really interesting photography exhibitions, but that printing process is always really crucial whenever we show photography. We've done several exhibitions of historical printing processes, 19th century printing processes for photography, alt photo, which is kind of a popular thing now. And we have a book gallery, so we've shown one of the country's best hand bookbinders, Craig Jensen. We just had a show of his work in the book gallery. I think when people come to the museum, they're always amazed because there's different things to see. And I think in the case, especially of these fine bindings, it's something that is really interesting to people. They might have an awareness of, but few people really see this type of artwork. And I think we're one of the few places in the region that shows that kind of stuff. So.
And what are these traveling exhibitions?
Well, sometimes other institutions organize exhibitions that are like the ones that are framed and in the crate, and they travel around the country, and we host those from time to time.
I see.
Yeah. We also, as part of our permanent collection, we have exhibitions that are framed and crated and ready to go out. So we have some...
Like to schools, or?
Well, we do have an exhibition of prints, fine art prints, created by the museum's artist-in-residence, Charles Kreiner, and we have a collection of about 10 prints that go to area schools. We also have a collection of what we call the bird prints, the Gentling bird prints, and they were created by 2 Texas artists, based on the Audubon elephant folio, Birds of America. These are birds of Texas, and so that exhibition is available for travel.
Very good. Well, I see we've got less than 2 minutes left, so can I ask you to give a salient but concise taste of the classes that you offer?
Sure. Every spring and fall, we have a full roster of classes that include bookbinding. We have 4 working studios at the museum. We have bookbindery, lithography studio, letterpress studio, and papermaking studio. So the classes sort of revolve around those activities, the arts of the book, we call it. So you can come learn lithography with Charles Kreiner, take a letterpress class, learn how to set type, learn how to make paper. And all of that information is on our website. And then during the summer, we do a book art studio, which is a 4-day-long session, Monday through Thursday. On Monday, you make paper. Tuesday, you do paste paper decoration. On Wednesday, you do lithography with Charles. And then on Thursday, we do bookbinding. So we have sessions for children. We have sessions just for adults a lot of teachers like to come. They get 10 hours of continuing education credit. And then we have sessions of the Book Art Studio where children and parents or grandparents can come together and learn how to make books.
Very good. Well, I see we need to wrap up, so let me mention that the museum very definitely does need volunteers. And assuming someone would like to find out more about the museum or express an interest in volunteering, what is the phone number and the website?
Okay, the phone number of the museum is 713-522-4652. And our webpage is www.printingmuseum.org.
Very good.
And we need volunteers in all of the areas we've just discussed.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. It's a great museum. And I want to thank you, the viewer, for being with us on this edition of the Volunteer Journal. And we'll see you next time here on HTV. Thanks.